Morning, and welcome to my version of the introduction to the United Nations. And the introduction to the United Nations begins with World War One. Now, when I went to college, World War One became one of my favorite subjects, only because most people don't pay attention to it. It was the first of called the Great War, the war to end all wars, but had some pretty serious ramifications that lead directly to World War II. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the war itself, but this is just kind of pre-war information that eventually will lead to just kind of an outline of situations that leads to World War II and the creation of what's called the United Nations. Today it was called the League of Nations back then. So also in here is a bit of a love story. So I know that many of you may need to get some tissue paper because it's kind of a tragedy, a tragic love story, if you will. So, Mackenzie and Jake McCabe, you guys, you may need to be prepared for this story. All right. So this story is going to begin with what we would call in our circles a terror organization. This terror organization is called the Black Hand. And in order to understand the Black Hand, you have to understand that the country we're talking about is called Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary. Now, Austria-Hungary is an empire. It's a large tract of land in Europe that eventually will be broken into smaller pieces, but at the time it was pretty massive. And within this massive land called Austria-Hungary, there were ethnic groups, hundreds of ethnic groups that lived within the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And one of those groups is called Serbia. So Serbia at the time is not a country or a state. It's a region within Austria-Hungary of the Serbic people. So the Black Hand is a group of young Serbs who want to someday create their own independent country of Serbia. And if you know anything about geography, we do have a Serbia today. So the Black Hand, these young, terrorists are going to plot an assassination of the leader or the future leader of Austria-Hungary. And his name is Franz Ferdinand. Yes, Ezra, Franz Ferdinand, the same name as the band from, I don't know, about five years ago or so. You can look them up, Franz Ferdinand. They got a couple of pretty good hits out there. But they are named after this gentleman who is the future leader, the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. Now, these members of this organization, the Black Hand, had tuberculosis back in those days, in the 1900s, early 1900s. That's pretty much a death sentence. So these guys are plotting this assassination, knowing that their lives are going to be shortened anyway by tuberculosis. So basically, they have nothing to lose. So they make a plan, and they plot, and they wait. Oh, there's the hand. It used to wave. Oh, boy. All right. So now let's get to the victims. So this is Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophie. And this, may get a little bit sappy and sad, but this is basically, it's based on a true story. So Franz Ferdinand is the nephew of the emperor. So he's the Archduke, future Duke of Austria-Hungary. And the current emperor is an older gentleman by the name of Franz Joseph. Franz Joseph at this time, I believe, is in his 80s. So it's a matter of time before Ferdinand takes over. Now, Ferdinand was kind of a gruff fella. not your typical royal who acted royal. He was kind of rough around the edges. And the Viennese or Vienna elite, the upper society, didn't really care much for Franz Ferdinand. And Franz Ferdinand is going to fall in love. Oh, as school age children, sometimes you think you fall in love. Well, Franz Ferdinand is going to fall in love with Sophie. Now the problem is Sophie is not of royal blood. She is a commoner. Oh my goodness, she's a commoner. And uh, in monarchies like the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, that is unacceptable behavior. But Franz doesn't care because he's in love with Sophie. And the penalty he's going to pay for falling in love with a commoner and marrying a commoner is Franz Joseph is going to say, hey, dude, do whatever you want, but you're never going to rule this, or your children, I should say. Your children will never rule Austria-Hungary. And Franz Ferdinand says, that's fine, Big Cheese. No worries. I'm in love, and that's all that matters. So he does have an official capacity, Franz Ferdinand, in that he is the inspector of troops for the Austro-Hungarian military. So when he's out in public, when he is seen as a member of the military, when he's doing his official duties, I should say, he is not supposed to be, or Sophie can never be with him because she is not recognized as of royal blood. There is an exception, however, if he is in an outside territory, if he's somewhere within Austria-Hungary, but it's not technically a legal part of the state, he could theoretically be seen with Sophie in public. Otherwise, in his official capacity, he was not supposed to go out in public with his wife. So he's going to the city of Sarajevo, and he's supposed to inspect the troops when he's in Sarajevo. And because it's a territory, it's not officially Austria-Hungary, he had made a plan to bring Sophie with him so that when he was to parade around in front of the military, inspecting the troops, she could be on the sidelines watching him and seeing how powerful he is. Oh, Franz, you are so powerful and mighty. I'm just going to sit here and stare at you as you inspect the troops. You man, you know, that kind of mindset. So he brings her along. It's going to be their wedding anniversary, and he had planned this beautiful day where he could actually be in public with his wife, Sophie. I told you, you can grab the tissues. Just make sure you're on mute if you're blowing your noses. Thank you. Okay, it'd be nice if this worked properly. All right, so there's Franz, got the beautiful hat working there. Sophie, she's also participating. So June 1914, they are in this beautiful convertible limousine. They're driving through Sarajevo. I don't know if they had completed the inspection of the troops or if they were on their way to the inspection of the troops. My hunch is they were on their way. But you remember the Serbian group, the Black Hand. Now, the Black Hand is now aware that Ferdinand is going to be in the city, and they have an idea of where the routes might go. So they kind of spread out on the chance that they could, one of them at least, should encounter the motorcade of the Archduke. And they do. Along the route, you can see the scenario here. Two initial members are near the motorcade and within range, but they kind of chicken out. They don't throw their bombs. They just kind of disperse into the crowd. They couldn't do it. Uh, a second one does actually throw a bomb, but the chauffeur saw it out of the corner of his eye or what have you, and it kind of hits the engine, the mount of the engine, and kind of bounces off into the streets. And Ferdinand, for all of his, this attack, still wants to continue on, even though Sophie was, slightly injured. But she says I'm okay, Franz. I'm okay, Franz. Let's continue on. This is our special day. That's my impression of Sophie. Anyway, so the motorcade continues. Now, some people, conspiracy theorists, would say that maybe the driver was in on this, but somewhere along the way, the car takes a wrong turn, and it just so happens it took a wrong turn near the gentleman in the lower left, a member of the Black Hand by the name of Guevara Prince. And as the car stops to turn around, Princip walks up to the car and fires 2 shots, and he will kill both Franz and Sophie. I know. It's a sad story. Oh, and I even had it down here. Ferdinand shouted, "Sophie, don't die! Live for our children!" Give you a little bit of time. Collect yourselves. Oop. So here is where we get into the beauty or the despair of World War I. And this is some of the information that you'll probably have to remember. Now, I know you'll remember the love story and what happens, and I get that. But this is what transpires, which leads to the war. So this one little event, well, it's not a little event, it's the assassination of a future leader of a country and his wife. So it's not a small event by any means. But Austria-Hungary now has to do something. This little terror organization, the Black Hand, has killed the leader or the future leader of their country and his wife. Now, they've had problems historically with Serbia, and this time they're going to make an example of them. And they sign an agreement with Germany because the Serbian people are what are called Slavic. Means they have a certain language group, the Slavic language group, which, by the way, is similar or the same as Russia. So Austria-Hungary knows that if they were to punish Serbia, that the Russians may get involved. So they turn to Germany and sign a little agreement and say, hey, we're going to kind of slap the Serbians on the wrist for allowing the Black Hand to assassinate our future leader. And just in case they get a little reinforcement from the Russians, would you guys, hook us up and help us out? So they sign an agreement. Germany says, of course, because the Germans are always ready and willing. So Austria-Hungary gives Serbia a set of conditions. It says, you must do this, this, and this, otherwise we're going to invade. And the Serbians don't want anything to do with Austria-Hungary. They say, oh, okay, no problem. We agree with all your terms. We'll give you whatever you want. But Austria-Hungary invades anyway. Oh, the nerve. So they intend to humiliate Serbia, right? They're really bluffing. They're really don't want to go to war, mind you, but they want to save face. They want to show the rest of the empire within Austria-Hungary that they mean business. You can't go around killing their leaders. All right, so they invade. Now the Russians historically have honored the Serbians or Slavic people with protection. So to them, this invasion meant Well, we have to save face as well. They're invading our brothers and sisters. So they start to mobilize their army. Now remember, Russia is the largest country in the world, and it's massive. And this is 1913, 1914. It's a long time ago, and it takes forever for them to kind of mobilize their troops. But they're starting the process. But they don't want to go to war. They don't want to die over Serbians. But it's something that they feel it's part of their duty, their honor. So they start to mobilize. All right. So this leads to what we're called the system of alliances for World War One. And we have alliances today. The United States belongs to a military alliance called NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, where we and about 20 other countries agree to help each other out in case of war or conflict of some sort. We will come to each other's aid. Now, it doesn't mean we're actually going to fight for them, but we may give some type of support. All right. So, World War One, these countries have some alliances. The Germans, again, established this dual alliance, right? The Mutual Defense Pact with Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary was afraid of the Russians, so they signed an agreement with Germany. Later, Italy is going to join, and they'll become known as the Triple Alliance. And that is one of your terms that you're going to have to know for future reference. This Triple Alliance agrees to attack any country that attacks any one of the alliance. So Germany, again, is trying to protect itself from France. So they get Italy involved, and they're worried about the Russians on one side and the French on the other side. So they want help, just in case. France knows what the Germans are doing. So France signs an agreement with Russia. Now they had formed an agreement earlier, but their agreement basically is any member of the Triple Alliance attacks us, then you come help us out. And then the British, GB is Great Britain, not Green Bay. The British sign the agreement as well, and they become known as the Triple Entente, the friendly agreement. So you have the Triple Alliance, and you have the Triple Entente. You probably need to know those for future reference. And then there's this guy. This guy's been dead for a few years. In 1906, we're talking 1914 now. But his name is von Schlieffen. And he had a plan. He's a German. And his plan was called the Schlieffen Plan, oddly enough. And the key to the Schlieffen Plan is that this is the only plan that the Germans had, strategy as far as their military is concerned. And the way the Schlieffen Plan works is if throughout Europe there is a mobilization anywhere, that means we must prepare for war. So, and the German Schlieffen Plan also says any German war must be won on the West, and a two-front war must be avoided. So, one on the West, if you know the geography of Germany, on their western border is France, on their eastern border is Russia. So they need to knock out the western country of France first. And it says we will funnel troops through Belgium into France for a quick victory. And this was their only plan. Mobilization means war. All right. And off we go. The Russians start to mobilize their troops. That signals to the Germans who had just signed this agreement with Austria-Hungary and Italy that, hey, according to the Schlieffen Plan, the Russians are preparing for war, so we must go to war. And when we go to war, we're going to try to knock the western half out of it first so we can defend ourselves against the Russians on the east. So before it all kicks off, they're already funneling troops through Belgium. Belgium refuses to allow the German military through, so they're going to go through anyway. And then the British get involved. with the Belgians, and they declare war on Germany. And Austria-Hungary declares war on Russia because the Germans are afraid of their rear flank. So now Austria-Hungary has declared war on Russia, and Great Britain and France now, seeing that the Germans are going through Belgium, declare war on Austria-Hungary because they know they're an ally of the Germans. And the Ottoman Empire, another empire at this time, uh, joins the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Austria-Hungary, right? And before you know it, you've got the vast majority of Europe lined up to fight each other, and World War I begins. All right, I'm going to end it there. I hope you enjoyed your love story and the beginning of World War I.